Commander Jake Morrison stood on the deck of the USS Enterprise, his jaw clenched tight as he watched the old man approach the restricted area. The aircraft carrier was in the middle of sensitive operations, and civilians had no business being anywhere near the flight deck. The salty ocean breeze whipped across the massive ship as Morrison quickened his pace toward the intruder. The man looked to be in his 70s, wearing a faded navy jacket that had seen better days. His gray hair was thin and his walk was slow, but there was something in his posture that spoke of military training from decades past. Morrison didn't care about the man's history right now. Security was security, and rules were rules. "Sir, you need to leave this area immediately," Morrison called out as he reached the veteran. "This is a restricted zone during active operations." The old man turned slowly, his weathered face showing no surprise at being confronted. His name tag read Thomas Chen, and beneath it were ribbons that Morrison recognized but didn't have time to study closely. The veteran's eyes were sharp and alert, contrasting with his aged appearance. "Son, I think there's something you should know," Chen said calmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades giving orders himself. "I've been monitoring communications, and there's a situation developing that your command might not be aware of." Morrison felt his patience wearing thin. The flight operations around them were critical, and he had dozens of pilots preparing for missions. The last thing he needed was some old-timer trying to relive his glory days by interfering with current operations. "Sir, I don't care what you think you heard," Morrison replied firmly. "You're not authorized to be in this area, and you need to return to the visitor section immediately. Security will escort you if necessary." Chen reached into his jacket pocket, causing Morrison to tense slightly. But instead of a weapon, the veteran pulled out a small device that looked like an old radio scanner. The device was crackling with static and fragmented transmissions that Morrison couldn't quite make out. "Commander, please listen to this," Chen insisted, holding up the device. "I've been picking up submarine communications on old frequencies that most people have forgotten about. There's chatter about an unauthorized approach. Something about a nuclear submarine breaking protocol." Morrison glanced at his watch. He had a briefing to attend in 10 minutes, and the flight deck needed to be cleared for incoming aircraft. The old man's story sounded like the ramblings of someone who had been out of the service too long and was trying to insert himself into current operations. "Look, Mr. Chen," Morrison said, reading the name tag, "I appreciate your service, but modern naval operations don't use those old communication systems. Whatever you're hearing is probably just interference or old training broadcasts. Now please, for your own safety and the security of this operation, you need to leave." The veteran's expression hardened slightly, and Morrison caught a glimpse of the steel that had probably made Chen a formidable officer in his younger years. Around them, sailors were preparing equipment and aircraft, the constant hum of activity creating a backdrop of urgency that made Chen's presence even more inappropriate. "Commander Morrison," Chen said, having apparently noted Morrison's rank insignia, "I served on submarines for 32 years. I know what emergency protocol communications sound like, and I'm telling you that there's a submarine out there that's not following orders. The transmissions I'm picking up suggest it's approaching this position without authorization." Morrison had heard enough. He gestured to two nearby security personnel who immediately began walking toward them. The safety and security protocols of the aircraft carrier were not something he was willing to compromise, regardless of who was making claims about submarine communications. "Security will escort you back to the appropriate area," Morrison announced. "This conversation is over." As the security team approached, Chen's device suddenly erupted with a burst of clear transmission that made both men freeze. The voice coming through the static was urgent and professional, using military call signs and codes that definitely sounded current rather than historical. "Bravo 77, this is Deep 6 Actual. We are proceeding to target coordinates despite command recall. Repeat, we are not acknowledging the abort order. Surface contact bearing 270, range 12 nautical miles. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The transmission was clear enough that he could make out most of the details, and the terminology being used was definitely current naval protocol. Chen looked at him with an expression that mixed vindication with genuine concern. "Commander, that submarine is talking about a surface contact at bearing 270, Chen explained quietly. "If my calculations are right, that's exactly where we are right now." The security personnel had reached them, but Morrison held up a hand to signal them to wait. He was beginning to realize that Chen's warnings might not be the ramblings of an old veteran after all. The transmission they had just heard was too specific and too professional to be anything other than authentic military communications. "Sir, how are you able to receive these transmissions?" Morrison asked, his tone now more respectful and concerned. "Our communications department hasn't reported any submarine traffic in this area." Chen adjusted a dial on his device, bringing in clearer reception. "These old frequencies were used for emergency backup communications during my service. Most modern systems have moved to encrypted digital channels, but submarines still maintain capability on these frequencies for situations where primary communications fail." Another transmission crackled through the device, this one even more concerning than the first. The voice was different, suggesting multiple personnel were involved in whatever was happening beneath the waves. "Deep 6, actual. Be advised that surface vessels are present at target coordinates. Recommend immediate surface to establish visual contact and assert presence. Command authority is not recognized at this time." Morrison's training kicked in as he processed what they were hearing. An unauthorized submarine was apparently approaching their position and had ignored orders to abort their mission. Even worse, they seemed to be planning to surface near the aircraft carrier, which could create an extremely dangerous situation. "Mr. Chen, I need you to come with me immediately," Morrison said, his entire demeanor having shifted from dismissive to urgent. "We need to get this information to the bridge right away." The veteran nodded grimly, securing his device as they began walking quickly toward the command structure. Around them, the normal activities of the aircraft carrier continued, with most personnel unaware of the potential crisis developing beneath the waves. "Commander, there's something else you should know," Chen said as they walked. The call sign, Deep 6, was used by submarine units involved in classified operations during my time in service. If that submarine is using that designation, it means they're operating under some kind of special authority that might override normal command structure. Morrison felt his stomach tighten as the implications became clear. A rogue submarine with special operational authority was approaching his aircraft carrier, and his command structure apparently had no knowledge of the situation. The potential for disaster was enormous, especially if the submarine crew believed they had legitimate authority for whatever mission they were conducting. As they reached the entrance to the command center, Morrison realized that the old veteran he had been trying to dismiss might be the only person on the entire aircraft carrier who understood what was really happening in the waters below them. Chen's decades of submarine experience were about to become invaluable in ways that neither man could have anticipated just minutes before. The heavy door to the command center loomed ahead of them, beyond which Morrison would have to convince his superiors that a threat was approaching based on the word of a civilian veteran and transmissions that their own communications department had apparently missed entirely. Captain Sarah Rodriguez was reviewing flight schedules when Commander Morrison burst into the command center with the elderly civilian in tow. The bridge was busy with normal operations. Officers monitoring radar screens and coordinating with air traffic control. Rodriguez looked up with surprise and mild irritation at the interruption. "Commander Morrison, what's the meaning of bringing a civilian into the command center during active operations?" she asked sharply, her eyes moving between Morrison and the veteran who stood quietly beside him. "Ma'am, we have a potential emergency situation," Morrison replied, his voice tight with urgency. Mr. Chen here has been intercepting submarine communications that suggest an unauthorized vessel is approaching our position. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow skeptically. The aircraft carrier's sophisticated radar and sonar systems hadn't detected any submarine activity in the area. The idea that a civilian with what appeared to be an old radio could pick up communications that their advanced equipment had missed seemed highly unlikely. "Commander, our sonar technicians haven't reported any submarine contacts," she said firmly. "Are you suggesting that our multi-million-dollar detection systems have somehow failed while this gentleman's radio has succeeded?" Chen stepped forward respectfully, his bearing still showing traces of the military discipline that had shaped his decades of service. "Captain, with permission, I'd like to explain what I've been hearing. The submarine is using backup communication frequencies that most modern ships don't monitor routinely." Before Rodriguez could respond, Chen's device crackled to life again with another transmission. This time the voice was different, more urgent, and the content made everyone in the immediate vicinity freeze with attention. "Deep 6, actual. We are beginning emergency surface procedure. Ballast tanks are being blown now. Estimate surface contact in 4 minutes. All surface vessels in the area are advised of our presence." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of electronics and the distant sounds of flight deck operations. Rodriguez stared at the device in Chen's hands, her mind racing through the implications of what they had just heard. A submarine was surfacing in their immediate area without any prior notification or authorization. "Sonar. Immediate active sweep of our surrounding waters," Rodriguez commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge noise. "I want everything within 20 nautical miles identified right now." The sonar operator began adjusting his equipment, sending out active pings that would reveal any submerged vessels in the area. Within seconds, his screen began showing contacts that had been invisible to passive sonar detection. "Captain, I'm showing a large submarine contact bearing 275 degrees, range approximately 3 miles and closing," the sonar operator reported, his voice filled with surprise. "The contact is definitely surfacing based on the acoustic signature." Rodriguez felt her blood run cold. An unidentified submarine was surfacing dangerously close to her aircraft carrier, and her crew had been completely unaware of its presence until moments ago. The potential for collision or worse was enormous. "All stop. Emergency turn to starboard," she ordered immediately. "Sound general quarters. This is not a drill. Communications, get me fleet command immediately." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers began implementing emergency procedures. Alarm bells began ringing throughout the ship, and thousands of sailors began rushing to their emergency stations. The massive aircraft carrier began its slow turn to avoid the surfacing submarine. Chen moved closer to Rodriguez, his device still crackling with transmissions. "Captain, based on what I'm hearing, this submarine crew believes they have legitimate authority for whatever they're doing. They're not responding to abort orders from their command." "What kind of authority could override fleet command?" Rodriguez asked as she watched her officers coordinate the emergency response. The situation was unlike anything in her 20-year naval career. "During my service, certain submarine units operated under special classifications that gave them autonomy in specific situations," Chen explained. "If this is one of those units, they might have orders that supersede normal command authority under certain circumstances." The communications officer looked up from his station with a grim expression. "Captain, I can't raise fleet command. Our communication systems are experiencing some kind of interference. It's like something is jamming our frequencies." Morrison stepped closer to Rodriguez. "Ma'am, Mr. Chen has been monitoring their communications for the past hour. He might be our best source of intelligence about their intentions right now." Rodriguez nodded grimly, accepting the bizarre situation she found herself in. A civilian veteran with an old radio had become her primary intelligence asset in a crisis that her own systems had failed to detect until it was almost too late. "Mr. Chen, "What else can you tell me about what you've been hearing?" she asked, acknowledging his expertise despite the unusual circumstances. Chen adjusted his device to filter the static. "They've mentioned something called Operation Neptune's Shield several times. That wasn't an operation name I recognized from my time in service, but the way they're talking about it suggests it's some kind of protective or defensive mission." The sonar operator called out another update. "Captain, the submarine is now fully surfaced approximately 2 miles off our port beam. It's definitely a nuclear submarine, probably Ohio-class based on the acoustic signature." Through the bridge windows, they could now see the dark shape of the submarine breaking the surface of the ocean. Water cascaded from its massive hull as it completed its emergency surface procedure. The sight of an unidentified nuclear submarine appearing so close to the aircraft carrier was both impressive and terrifying. "Ma'am, the submarine is signaling us with lights," reported the visual communications officer. "They're using standard naval signaling protocols." Rodriguez grabbed a pair of binoculars to observe the submarine directly. Through the lenses, she could see figures on the submarine's conning tower operating signal lights in the precise patterns of naval communication. "What's the message?" she demanded, maintaining visual contact with the submarine while listening for the translation. "They're identifying themselves as USS Wyoming operating under Special Action Authorization 77 Alpha, the communications officer reported. They're requesting immediate conference with the senior officer present." Chen's device suddenly produced the clearest transmission yet, and the voice coming through was calm but authoritative. "USS Enterprise, this is USS Wyoming Actual. We are operating under classified orders related to a potential security threat to your vessel. Request permission to come alongside for immediate briefing of your command staff." Rodriguez lowered her binoculars, her mind working furiously to process the situation. The USS Wyoming was indeed a real submarine, part of the Ohio-class fleet. But its presence here was completely unexpected and unexplained by any orders she had received. "Communications, keep trying to reach Fleet Command," she ordered. "I need confirmation of this submarine's authority and mission status immediately." The Wyoming was now clearly visible to everyone on the bridge, its massive nuclear-powered hull riding low in the water as it maintained position relative to the aircraft carrier. The sight of the two most powerful vessels in the American naval arsenal facing each other under such uncertain circumstances was unprecedented. Chen's device crackled again with another transmission that made everyone's blood run cold. "Enterprise, be advised that we have detected hostile submarine activity in your area. Our orders are to provide protective escort, but we need immediate coordination to ensure your security." Rodriguez realized that what had started as a mysterious submarine appearance had now become a potential threat scenario involving hostile forces. The Wyoming wasn't just surfacing near her ship randomly. They were apparently responding to some kind of security threat that her own intelligence sources hadn't detected. "Mr. Chen, are you picking up any other submarine communications?" she asked urgently. "If there are hostile submarines in the area, we need to know about them immediately." The veteran was already adjusting his device, scanning through different frequencies as the bridge crew watched anxiously. The next few minutes would determine whether they were dealing with a friendly submarine offering protection or a much more complex and dangerous situation involving multiple underwater threats. Chen worked frantically with his device, scanning through frequencies while the bridge crew watched in tense silence. The USS Wyoming maintained its position 2 miles away, its crew clearly waiting for some kind of response from the aircraft carrier. Rodriguez found herself in the unprecedented situation of relying on a civilian veteran to provide critical intelligence about underwater threats. "I'm picking up something," Chen announced, his weathered face creasing with concentration. "Different call signs, different encryption patterns. This is definitely not American military communications." The sonar operator suddenly straightened in his chair, his face pale with alarm. "Captain, I'm detecting multiple submarine contacts. 3 vessels, possibly 4, approaching from different vectors. They were running silent. but the Wyoming's active sonar must have forced them to reveal their positions. Rodriguez felt her heart skip a beat as the full scope of the situation became clear. Her aircraft carrier was surrounded by unknown submarines, and the USS Wyoming had apparently surfaced to warn them of the threat. The mysterious submarine hadn't been acting rogue. It had been trying to protect them. "All ahead flank, evasive maneuvers," she ordered immediately. "Launch alert fighters, establish combat air patrol around the task force. This is now a hostile contact scenario." Chen's device erupted with foreign language transmissions that none of them could understand, but the tone and urgency were unmistakable. The unknown submarines were coordinating some kind of attack or intimidation operation against the American vessels. "Captain, the Wyoming is signaling again," reported the communications officer. "They're requesting permission to engage the hostile submarines and are asking us to maintain course 280 for optimal defensive positioning." Rodriguez realized that Commander Morrison had been completely wrong to dismiss the veteran, and she had nearly made the same mistake. Chen's old radio had provided the only advance warning of a coordinated submarine threat that their modern systems had completely missed until it was almost too late. "Signal the Wyoming, permission granted to engage hostile contacts," she ordered. "We'll maintain their requested course and provide air cover for their operations." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency as the aircraft carrier began its evasive maneuvers while simultaneously preparing for combat operations. On the flight deck above them, jet engines roared to life as pilots scrambled to their aircraft. Through his binoculars, Morrison could see the Wyoming beginning to dive again, preparing to engage the hostile submarines that surrounded them. The nuclear submarine disappeared beneath the waves with remarkable speed, leaving only a patch of disturbed water to mark where it had been. "Mr. Chen, can you continue monitoring their communications?" Rodriguez asked. "We need to know how this underwater battle is developing." Chen nodded, adjusting his device to track the various signals filling the underwater communication spectrum. "Captain, the hostile submarines are definitely coordinating their positions. They seem to be trying to establish some kind of perimeter around us." The sonar operator provided a running commentary as the underwater engagement began. "Wyoming is engaging the first hostile contact. I'm hearing torpedo launches, multiple weapons in the water." Rodriguez had trained for scenarios like this throughout her career, but the reality of commanding an aircraft carrier under attack was more intense than any simulation. The massive ship was performing evasive maneuvers while thousands of sailors worked at their battle stations throughout the vessel. "Ma'am, I'm getting communication from the Wyoming," the communications officer announced. "They're reporting that the hostile submarines are carrying advanced weaponry and appear to be part of a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation." Chen's device crackled with new transmissions, and his expression grew even more serious. "Captain, I'm hearing communications that suggest these submarines have been tracking American naval movements for weeks. This wasn't a random encounter. The implications were staggering. Enemy submarines had been conducting surveillance operations against American naval forces, and only the Wyoming's intervention had prevented what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach, or worse. "Sonar contact, torpedo in the water, bearing 185, the sonar operator called out urgently. "It's not targeted at us. Appears to be Wyoming engaging a hostile submarine." Rodriguez watched her crew perform with the professionalism and skill that made the American Navy the most effective maritime force in the world. Despite the chaos of the underwater battle, her aircraft carrier continued its operations while providing air cover for the submarine engagement. "Mr. Chen, without your warning, we would have been completely surprised by this attack," Rodriguez acknowledged as she coordinated with her officers. "Your service to your country didn't end when you retired." The veteran continued monitoring communications, providing real-time intelligence that supplemented their own sonar readings. "The hostile submarines are withdrawing," he reported. "I'm hearing retreat orders on their frequencies." The sonar operator confirmed Chen's assessment. Wyoming has eliminated one hostile contact and damaged another. The remaining submarines are moving away at high speed. As the immediate threat subsided, Rodriguez began to comprehend the full significance of what had just occurred. An enemy intelligence operation had been conducting surveillance against American naval forces, and only the combination of an old veteran's vigilance and a submarine crew's decisive action had prevented a major security breach. "Communications, are we back in contact with Fleet Command?" she asked, as the bridge crew began transitioning from combat to normal operations. "Affirmative, Captain. The jamming has stopped, and we have clear communications with headquarters," the communications officer reported. Rodriguez took a deep breath as she prepared to explain to Fleet Command how a civilian veteran had provided the crucial intelligence that prevented what could have been a devastating attack on her aircraft carrier. The story would sound incredible, but the evidence was undeniable. The Wyoming surfaced again, its crew having successfully defended the aircraft carrier from a coordinated submarine threat. Morrison watched through binoculars as the submarine's crew signaled their mission success and prepared to resume their patrol duties. "Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology," Morrison said, extending his hand to the veteran. "Your experience and dedication saved lives today." Chen shook Morrison's hand with a slight smile. "Commander, I spent 32 years underwater, and you learned to listen for things that others might miss. The ocean has its own language if you know how to hear it." Rodriguez coordinated the post-battle procedures while reflecting on how close they had come to disaster. The hostile submarines had been in perfect position to gather intelligence or launch an attack, and only Chen's vigilance had provided the advance warning that made their defense possible. As the USS Wyoming departed to resume its patrol, Rodriguez realized that the Navy's greatest asset wasn't just its advanced technology, but the dedication and experience of people like Thomas Chen, who continued to serve their country long after their official duties had ended. The old veteran had proven that wisdom and experience could be just as valuable as the most sophisticated equipment. The aircraft carrier resumed its normal operations. But everyone on the bridge knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. A chance encounter between a dismissive commander and a determined veteran had prevented what could have been one of the most significant security breaches in naval history. Chen quietly packed away his device, satisfied that he had done his duty one more time for the Navy that had shaped his life. As he prepared to return to the civilian areas of the ship, he knew that somewhere beneath the waves, the crew of the USS Wyoming was continuing their vigilant protection of American naval forces against threats that most people would never know existed.